Hi, my name is Ben Brownlee from Curious Turtle, and I'm going to be showing you some of the things that we can do with the BCC motion blur in Davinci Resolve. The motion blur effect uses optical flow to create a motion blur effect, which can either simulate the effect of shooting a moving object on film, or we can use it for a more stylistic type of effect. So let's see how this works in the edit room. I'll turn on my effect, and you can already see that it's doing something. We check out the area here. As the oil derrick moves up and down, you can see that the bits that are moving all of a sudden start to be a little bit more blurred. And we can control the amount of the blur using this slider here. And the other main slider to use is this velocity limit. And this velocity limit determines the range of the moving pixels that are filtered. So if I bring this down to a very low number, you can see there's almost no blurring on the effect anymore. So it's only taking the areas that are moving the most. And as I bring this limit up, you see that more and more of that image is being blurred out. I'm going to leave this number at 100 for a second. And I'm going to come down to motion vectors so we can have a look at what this is doing. And I'm going to composite my motion vectors onto render here. And this is showing us the velocity of the pixels that are moving and therefore being affected by the motion blur filter. As I turn this down, you can see that more of these vectors are being filtered out. So this is actually an easy way of seeing what our velocity limit is filtering. I'm going to turn off my motion vectors here and come a little bit further down so we can have a look at the blur threshold. This is another good property to adjust when we're getting some artefacting, because by turning this up, what we're doing is blurring out the areas where there's an abrupt change in color. So for example, if we take a look at this area down here again, as I turn my blur threshold up, this just helps to get a more natural looking motion blur effect. And now if we play that clip through, you can see we're getting some nice pronounced motion blurring on the areas of the footage that are moving, and everything else is staying still and unaffected. But there is another way of using this motion blur to create a more stylized type of look. And let's find a frame where we can see this quite easily. Maybe on the hand here. And let's just turn the blur up quite high. Now currently I have the blur type set to blur. So this is blurring in both directions. We can also set this to smear, so it's actually only blurring in a single direction. And I can have a smear fall off, where at 0 the smear is fully applied, and at 100 we have no smear applied at all. So we can adjust this here. If we were applying this effect in the color room, we could also keyframe this effect. Once again, I'm going to have a look at my motion vectors and use it to adjust the velocity limit here, so I'm only smearing out on the ballerina and not taking any of the black background with it. Now here I'm going to turn up the amount even further, and as we play this back, you can see that we get a sort of ethereal, otherworldly look rather than a more natural looking motion blur. And I actually really like this sort of stylized effect. So that's a couple of different ways that we can start to use the BCC motion blur. We can also tune the optical flow method using the advanced settings, but this is a good place to get you started with BCC motion blur in Davinci Resolve. Thanks for watching, and be sure to click on the link in the description to download a free trial of Continuum for OFX and check it out for yourself. Also, follow Boris Effects on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date with the latest information and training materials on Continuum, Sapphire, Mocha Pro and all the Boris Effects products.